Just have to check and make sure I'm on, yeah? Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be back with you. So it's interesting because I actually was here in August last year, almost a year to the date. And I had to force myself not to look at what I said about vitality last year. Because I really wanted to see what is there to be said this year. What does Spirit have to share this year as opposed to last year? So I can't actually wait until this is over so I can actually compare it and see what actually was different and what is kind of ringing as the same. I also wanted to just share with you personally and thank you for all of your intention and prayers, because I actually have moved somewhat forward with my home purchase, and now we are looking for a closing date. So that is about as far as it's gotten. So I'm very excited about that and wanted to thank the community for all of your intention around that. As I always like to start with the definition of the word we're focusing on from a secular perspective, just to ground it somewhere. The definition of vitality, there are two: the peculiarity distinguishing the living from the non-living. And it's interesting to hear that definition because that's not really the way we interact with the idea of vitality. But that's one of the definitions that we want to talk about a little bit today. And then the other is the capacity to live and develop. Also, physical or mental vigor, especially when highly developed. So it's interesting that these would be the two kind of foundations of this idea of vitality, because one of the first myths that I would say around vitality is that you can only access your vitality through what you've accomplished. So we kind of generally look to see what have we accomplished, and that then becomes a kind of barometer for how good we feel. And generally that if we're looking at the measurement of our vitality, we're actually looking at vitality from the non-living aspect of it. We think about how much money we don't have. We think about how much weight we still have to lose. We think about how tired we feel or how incomplete our relationships are. What is there left to do, as opposed to being present to what is and being accepting of what is and being appreciative of what is. So one could say that we tend to look at, if we're continually looking at vitality from how much we have or how much we don't have, then we kind of miss the point. And it's interesting because if the journey is to be, or if the goal of life is to be connected to divine mind, to be in concert with divine mind, then all of the measurements we have of where we're disconnected from divine mind, guess what? Remind us of where we're disconnected. So the word we're saying to ourselves is that we are disconnected, that there's something still to do, that there's some place to get. And I would say that rather than a journey of getting to be with divine mind someday, that someday it'll be better, the goal really is to center ourselves with divine mind every day, on a daily basis, and not waiting for some event to happen or some measurement that says, I'm okay now, as opposed to all is well. So the second myth I want to talk a little bit about is the idea that with vitality, you are the only causative factor in your vitality. That it really is just about you. It's centered only in what you can experience and or achieve and or move with, and that other people are not involved. that it really is a solo experience as opposed to one that also happens within community. So consider that our spiritual experience is often that of the solo practitioner. And even though we're all here today, when you leave here today, often our spiritual practice goes back to that of solo practitioner. And that can show up in a couple of different ways, and we can acknowledge it in a couple of different ways. Sometimes our individual practice has to do with what are we reading. It has to do with our time in meditation. It has to do with silent observation of the world and ourselves in relationship of the world. But sometimes our practice, or our solo practice, sometimes lives in arrogance. And our solo practice is that which actually separates us from the community, even when we're sitting in the midst of community. So it's things like, sitting and you hear somebody speak and you say, they really don't get it. Something you say to yourself, you might say it out loud, she really doesn't get it. Or it's something like, I just don't understand why they do that. Why do they do that? Or one day she's gonna get it together. One day it'll be okay for her. Once she understands more, it'll be okay for her. And in either case, there really is an opportunity when we bring our solo practice to community. Because our vitality can never really be solely sourced by ourselves. We're always in community, whether we like it or not. You may not want to be in community. Too bad. It comes with being human. You don't get away from the other humans. You just can't. And when you enter into community, there's something to be said for how do you come into community? With your thought. What is your thought? Is your thought coming at 10 o'clock on Sunday that I have something that I want to get centered around? Is it that I want to just be with people who think similarly to me? Do I just want to let go of thinking for an hour? What is your thought that you come here with? Because whatever thought you come here with combines with all the other thoughts that are present at that particular moment, and divine mind is not one that's kind of like selective and say, oh, you know what, I like that thought, I don't like that one, I like that one, I don't like that one. It doesn't work that way. We bring our collective thought together to become one thought, and then we do live in the manifestation of what that thought is. So when stuff starts going left, then you can actually check yourself and check your own thoughts and say, what is my contribution to the current state of our community? And we often don't do that. And I have to tell you that I've been very troubled over the last couple of weeks with everything that's going on in the world, with all of the different opinions. No one is actually saying, I will take responsibility for where this is today. We're all doing this. This is what we see in the media. Everybody pointing to somebody or some organization or some political group or some ideology, and no one willing to say, I will be accountable for this. And as long as that's the case, then we are continually living in a disconnection from what divine mind actually is, because we are a part of all of it. And we cannot maintain our own vitality by ourselves. All of those thoughts contribute to how vital we feel or not. And it's interesting, there was a quote that I read in a book that Nick shared with me, 365 Days of Science of Mind, and it says, to keep a lamp burning, we have to keep putting oil in it. Simple thought from Mother Teresa. And what's interesting is that we generally think about Mother Teresa as kind of like, healing the sick and people picking up the people out of the gutter, and it's all very ethereal and it's very holy. But she understood, I can't keep doing this unless I am constantly putting oil in this lamp. And that might be through prayer, that might be through meditation, that might be through speaking with someone, that might be through being mentored, not always being the hero. And that is another talk at another time. The fascination with being the hero. That no one ever really wants to be Judas when they're replaying like the story of the Christ. Everybody wants to be, either Jesus, or you want to be Mary Magdalene, like the first one to the rock. There's like that way that we have, like we don't want to be the victim or the villain, and sometimes we are. And sometimes the acknowledgement that we are the villain kind of tearing stuff up, making stuff crazy for other people, that is the access to destroying that thought. But you've got to be willing to actually say what's so about it. And then the third myth, this third idea, is that you can actually restore or maintain your vitality without some kind of sacrifice. That it's not going to take something to actually maintain or restore your vitality, or that it's just going to happen on its own because you are this person connected to the divine. And to a certain degree, there is a birthright that we expect, that we expect to be cared for, we expect to be protected. But I have to say, as someone who doesn't really watch what I eat and doesn't exercise all that often, I don't actually think I'm going to be losing any weight. I really think, most days I walk around like, it'd be great if I could just lose 10 pounds, but I'm not changing what I'm eating. I'm not going to start going to the gym or anything. I just kind of want it to be gone, like magic. Or we look at, you look at your finances, and I'm someone who had horrible finances. And I mean the kind of finances where people call your house at 7 o'clock in the morning because they want to catch you off guard and hope that you'll pick up the phone because you think it's an emergency. That's the kind of financial trouble I was in at one point in my life. And I can see now that I was not being a good steward over and managing expenses versus income. And there's got to be more income than expenses. And if anything happens with that equation, then I need help. And the asking for help did not come until long after the balance was just completely off. But we still think that something's coming in to save the day, that some magical force is going to come in and save the day. And we have to sacrifice in order to maintain or restore our vitality. If you want to lose weight, eat differently, exercise. If you want your finances to be better, then you have to have more income than expenses. If you want your relationships to be better, you've got to tell the truth. If you want your relationships to be better, there's some truth telling that needs to go on, and not just the truth about the other person. You might spend some time figuring out what's the truth of your part of the interaction. That's the nasty part sometimes. You want to restore your vitality, who do you have to forgive? Because that will drain the entire experience of being alive out of you. Who do you have to forgive? But the other question is, who do you need to ask forgiveness of? It's not just a one-way trip. Love is a thing that restores vitality. Who do you need to love more? Who do you need to offer love to? How do you repair those relationships? You have to actually say what's going on. What's that elephant in the room that nobody wants to acknowledge? And in some instances, it may be completing relationships that's required to actually restore your vitality back to you. Because hoping and wishing that one day it's going to be different will drain the life right out of you, because it's not about the present moment. It's not about your present relationship with the divine. It's about one day, someday, fixing yourself enough so that somehow somebody other than you might like you. And it's draining. It's exhausting. And none of this is easy. And I'm not suggesting that it is. Because this kind of introspection and acknowledgement can sometimes be jarring. And that's where your community comes in. Because you don't have to do this as a solo practitioner. You don't have to do this work all alone. But to maintain your vitality, you must do some work. There's something you have to bring to it. I wanted to conclude with an affirmation from this same book, 365 Days of Science of Mind. A Year of Daily Wisdom was written by Ernest Holmes, and you'll find this on page 228. So what I'd like to do is just read this a little call and response and read it, and then you can find it on your own. But I think this is a good way to actually tie up this idea that we have some responsibility and some opportunities in restoring, maintaining, and being present to that experience of, am I part of the living? Am I part of the non-living? And how do I balance those two things? So if you would repeat after me, consciously, I draw upon the life that is mine. I know that the fullness of life, which is divine in its origin, eternal in its presence, and forever available, is mine. The life of the eternal Spirit is my life. The infinite riches of its being are mine to enjoy. The vitality, the wisdom, and the peace of God are mine. I accept them. I accept them. I accept them in fullness, in joy, and in peace. My thought is a gateway to illumination. It is the secret place of the Most High within me. Therefore I revel in the fullness of life at this moment. I accept life as a glorious experience, a spiritual adventure. I thank you, and let us all thank God. Amen.